Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com.
We are broadcasting from the Blue Chew Studios. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code JR at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. Hello and welcome to Grilling JR. This is Paul Bromwell, and I'm joined by the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. JR, how are you today?
I'm pretty good, better than I look. Obviously, with a black eye on my my left side. I was leaving for Charlotte Saturday to fly to do that Battle of the Belts. And for some reason, I just all of a sudden lost my balance. And when I lost my balance and I started stumbling and falling, I tried to catch myself, and my face went face first into the concrete wall. So I got a big knot here, over here someplace, and this black eye. So
my goodness. JR, was that at the airport or?
I was here in front of my front door.
Oh,
I was going to the airport, and I made my booking and I worked and I came home and I've been suffering ever since.
my goodness.
So anyway, that's what happened there. It was just an accident. It wasn't an accident. It was, I didn't trip and fall. I just lost my balance. And all of a sudden my equilibrium was all screwed up and I don't know what happened. So I haven't had a chance to go to the doctor to check it out. So that's where I am on that deal. I've been in a lot of doctor's offices in the last several weeks, so we'll see how it works out.
Well, buddy, you've been busy, but I want to make sure we bring this up. You turned 70 years old since the last time I saw you. Happy belated birthday from me to you, man.
Appreciate it, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting number, huh?
Hey, it's a big one, and man, you are doing your thing again on Dynamite, Battle of the Belts. As we record this, just coming off of that show, it's so good to hear you back on TV where you belong, my friend.
Thank you. I'm having fun, and just I wish getting past this cancer treatments and giving my skin a chance to heal is well deserved and timely, because it's sure getting boring to hurt all the time. And I am hurting all the time because the radiation has just burnt my skin to crisp in that area down by my ankle. So it's not been any fun, man. And then this thing Saturday when I just all of a sudden, boom, a little concerning, but in any event, it is what it is, as they say, and I will be fine as always. At least that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So interesting weekend. Had fun time in Charlotte. Got to see a lot of friends, all that. David Crockett was there. If you watch the show, he was there. Presented the interim TNT title to Eddie. Eddie.
A lot of similarities.
Yeah, Sammy Guevara. Hell of a hand. He and Dustin, I thought, had a great match.
Great match.
Yeah, a good match. Dustin is just an exceptional worker. They had a good match. So it was a fun show. It was an hour show, and it was fun to do. So it's should be. It's just going to be. I just got to be patient with all my little injuries and my ailments. And we're going to go to Raleigh as this week as we're recording this. This Wednesday will be Raleigh. So anyway, we'll make it. You know, it's just my theory. You know how that goes. Got to roll them up, go to work. So anyway, I'm feeling pretty good, and we'll make this show fun. And it was a hell of a show.
It was
Royal Rumble 1997. Don't seem like it's been that long ago, but that's a good time ago.
It is, JR. And you know what? You mentioned Dustin, and my goodness, we're going to talk about him wrestling here on Royal Rumble 1997. So that tells you what kind of longevity he's had in his career, and put on a hell of a match, as you said, Battle of the Belts. But we're going to talk about him and so many other stars, from Bret Hart to Stone Cold, Undertaker, so many involved in this Royal Rumble. I've been looking forward to recording this one with you, man. So if you're ready to do it, you ready to jump in, we can do it.
Let's go. Yes, sir.
All right. Let's take a look at it, Jim. Today we are talking about Royal Rumble 1997. It's one of the biggest shows in WWF history, and we're coming off an In Your House, which was titled It's Time. That one featured Sid defeating Bret Hart to retain the WWF World title. You have The Undertaker, who defeated The Executioner in a last man standing match. And the show ends with a brawl between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. And the plans are in motion to put Bret and Shawn back together again at WrestleMania at this point, right? At least it feels that way.
Yeah, that was obviously the story, and unfinished business, and trying to get those two guys to blow off their angle. So it seemed like the never-ending story. It seemed like that story it kept cycling. So, but that's going to be the end game, is Bret and Shawn back together.
Yeah, they had the WrestleMania before. They had just done that amazing Iron Man match where Shawn wins the title. But here we are, beginning in '97. We're into the storyline here. Raw is going to open with Vader and Steve Austin, which you and Conrad, by the way, covered in your recent Steve Austin 95, 96 episode. So be sure to check that one out if you guys haven't listened to that one. But Bret's going to interfere. He's going to hit Austin. And this seems to feel like Bret is moving towards a heel role. Did you get that feeling as well here that, hey, it's time to make Bret the heel in this rivalry?
Well, it seemed to be timely. He had no issues with it. He felt it to be the right thing to do as well. You know, top talents has always been the tradition in wrestling. I think that top talents that are smart, Bret certainly was and is, were always involved in their creative. So I always enjoyed it too. Bret was always such a smart booker, creator, whatever you want to say. So it was it seemed like these stories are starting to come together, and so tweaks are being made on some other characters, like Goldust, for example.
Speaking of Goldust, as we're watching Raw, again, building to the Royal Rumble, there's a promo exchange between he and Jerry Lawler, and I need to bring this one up. Got to get your opinion here. This is from Meltzer. He said they did an angle turning Goldust both heterosexual and babyface, since obviously the two go hand in hand. Marlena, with Mark Marrow by her side, beat Jerry Lawler with Hunter Hearst Helmsley by his side in the Karate Fighters Championship match. Yes, that's a real thing. Lawler and Helmsley then attacked Marrow, and Goldust did a run-in and chased Helmsley away. Marrow and Helmsley then brawled to the back, leaving Goldust and Lawler in the ring. Lawler was cowering and said he had no problem with Goldust, and he should be happy a guy like Helmsley, who is rich and good-looking, and the Intercontinental Champ, is after Marlena, and finally, very lightly, asked Goldust if he was a queer, and Goldust responded no loudly and decked him, and Marlena came out with her conquering hero. So looking at this now, obviously you can't do this in today's era, but man, this was hard to watch then, let alone now, don't you think?
Yeah, it was uncomfortable talking about something so personal. You know, one's sexual likes and dislikes had not been explored really that deeply. Even Gorgeous George back in the day, you know, Gorgeous George's whole gimmick was based on, you know, homophobia. quite frankly. George was that way. That was his whole run. He was gay, as if that was a bad thing. He wasn't, by the way, and but he sure played the role well, and was a great chicken shit heel. To be honest with you. So the Karate Fighters was a big, good money maker for the company, big sponsorship, in-show sponsorship. So it was going to be a interesting night, to say the least.
Well, we can't leave the Karate Fighters alone, JR, because they have this tournament. It takes place. It's between Jerry Lawler and Sable, and you're in the ring overseeing this whole deal. JR, would you say this has to be one of the crowning achievements in your career, overseeing the Karate Fighters tournament?
Well, of course. I think about it all the time. No, it's the way it works, man. I don't really, you can't get in that era. You can't get too married to any of that creative.
Sure. Because
it was a whole different time. It was a different,
they're paying you big bucks to do this stuff, the Karate Fighters. Yeah.
Yeah, not bad. And so, yeah, I didn't feel bad about it. It's just a comedy deal. It's just a let me up segment, as Vince would call it. And that's what we had there. So, another day at the office, only this time it's on pay-per-view.
There you go. Well, there's an angle with Billy and Bart in their match from Meltzer. Billy Gunn wrestled Bart Gunn, and they did the Shawn Michaels angle all over again, but this time nobody was buying it. Billy supposedly broke his neck and laid there not moving while Billy and Bart's wife hit the ring. If it was their wives, I'm not certain if that was the case or not, if it was really their wives. But Billy's wife was overreacting while Bart was acting distraught at what he'd done to his so-called brother. Billy Gunn has talked about this before. He said in an interview once he was actually hurt and went numb at a house show. To give him time off, they do this angle and give him to give it some heat. But the company ends up asking him to stick around for the house show run until he could actually take time off. Do you remember this whole deal, JR? And why did it go down the way it did?
In a minor way, it was not something I lived and died with. It was a supportive storyline. There's just was it special? I don't know if it was special. If you liked it, then it was special. If you didn't like it, then it wasn't special. And to me, it was just another part of the menu, very diverse menu that we were serving up at that point in time.
Well, at the Raw taping, you have Honky Tonk Man returns to the company after a long 6-year hiatus. Do you remember him returning at this point, JR? Do you remember how that came together? Who was behind it? Were you involved in those discussions with Honky?
Of course. And it was just new talent, new faces, star power. And, it's always good to see Honky back in the picture. But I don't remember exactly how it all came about, but we were just looking for fresh names, new names that had some name identity that might have still some marquee ability. And Honky kind of fit that description. So like you said, it had been 6 years since he had been in WWE. So it was good to see him. And he was there for a short time.
Plus, you got to imagine here with the Royal Rumble coming, you need as many fresh, warm bodies as you can to fill up that classic Royal Rumble match. So I'm sure that might be a small part of it as well, too. Add a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's just like they're doing now, getting ready for the Royal Rumble.
Yes.
It's no different. It's always been the same. You want to add some new faces and give it a fresh coat of paint, so to speak, for the entrance into the Royal Rumble. So I think that was sort of all that was, quite frankly. And also guys with limited skills don't really have a problem working the Rumble because it's basically a battle royal where as we all know, and if you can take a bump over the top, you're in, so to speak. You don't have to be a great worker anymore. You have to be a personality and somebody that is somebody that's is willing to take a bump over the top rope.
Yeah, and that people remember. Yeah, that people remember a little bit too, and have fond memories of.
Qualifications aren't that stringent on this one.
Yeah. Well, JR, the next week on Raw, Mil Mascaras is introduced as the greatest wrestler out of Mexico, and you interview him. Do you have any fond memories or memories at all of Mil?
No, just he was a very unique guy, very protective of his persona. He stood on his gimmick. He was very loyal to. In other words, I never saw him unmasked ever. and he protected his gimmick, as they say, very strongly. So he serviced the business. He'd been around for a long time. He was going to protect his gimmick, and he did. So I never had any issues with Mill. Some guys did that were working with him because they felt like he wasn't giving enough, so whether he was or he wasn't, I didn't work with him. So in my role, I had no issues with Bill Mascaras. So all the locker room bullshit about, well, he was hard to do business with, and he didn't like putting people over. You hear that about 30 guys. So what? That's what I say.
Yeah. JR, this is also around the time where there's some type of deal made with AAA. We have Puroth Jr., and forgive me if I butcher some of the pronunciations of these names, and Cybernetico, and they debut against the New Rockers. It's not great, but with the Royal Rumble approaching, were you all expecting these high flyers, to come in similar to like a WCW Cruiserweight division? Is that kind of the goal or the play here with the relationship with AAA at this time?
I think the goal was just get some new talent that could have a diverse skill set. And these guys are high flyers, and they were fresh for our audience. They're fresh for our TV. So I don't think it was any more than that, quite frankly.
Well, from the Observer, there were loud NWO chants every time Razor and Diesel were in the ring. Obviously, we're right in the middle of the whole NWO, again, January 97. This thing just isn't working, according to Dave Meltzer. From the commentary, I get the impression they realize it isn't with Rick Bogner, but are trying to salvage something out of Glenn Jacobs because he has the size and everyone likes how hard he's trained and has attempted to improve. But even so, he's still never shown any spark yet. Was this how everyone was taking a look at Razor and Diesel at this point? Was that the lens you were looking at him, kind of, hey, will we have something eventually with these guys if these gimmicks don't work out?
Well, we knew we were going to have something with Glenn because Glenn's too reliable. He's too solid. And he's too good a human being not to take a chance on, so to speak. But we knew something would come along for Glenn, whether it was this deal or not. This deal was more to service the anti-Turner sentiment.
Right.
No more, no less. And he needed to look something like
Big Daddy Cool.
Yeah, and he did, So that's kind of where we were with that, Paul. It wasn't for any of the two, Wagner or for Glenn. It wasn't created for them. It's created characters for them, but we didn't know how long it was going to last, and many of us thought it was short term to start with.
And how well it did turn out for Glenn Jacobs, eventually assuming the role of Kane. So around this time frame, too, it's been in talks for months now at this point that ECW is going to run a pay-per-view. Did the WWF have anything to do with it in terms of helping at this point?
I don't know what you mean.
Was Paul Heyman, had he started reaching out around this time in 1997 to say, hey, we're looking to put on our first pay-per-view and we'd like to reach out to you and your organization to see if there's anything you can do to help us out? Or
I would think that was probably a Paul and Vince deal.
Okay.
Just to get it all organized. And we knew that all those ECW guys are very loyal. If you listen to Busted Open, which I do pretty much every day, Bubba always works in an ECW reference. And so there was an audience for it, and it was a fresh idea. And a lot of the guys that were infamous in ECW were still working. And so they were very motivated to put on a hell of a show. And in my humble opinion, they accomplished that.
Yeah, their first pay-per-view was April of 97, so just a few short months after this time frame, barely legal. Did you ever hear of the New Jack Mass Transit incident and how that derailed the plan of the ECW pay-per-view? I know we're digging into a few ECW questions, but do you remember ever hearing about that brutal stabbing incident that occurred between those two guys?
No, I heard about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know New Jack to any large degree, the late New Jack. We didn't travel in the same circles. I knew him from OVW, but again, it was just trying to generate new business, and we thought that the ECW pay-per-view was a way of doing that, creating new monies.
Well, we move on to Shotgun Saturday Night. It's about to debut for you guys at this point. How many different versions of this show were talked about before that final product debuted? Do you remember the whole brainchild and concept and what you guys kind of brainstormed behind Shotgun Saturday Night, Jim?
Well, again, it was just trying to create another TV show that folks would watch. And that was the goal, creating new product.
Yeah.
And I think that was the sole purpose of that situation. I don't know if I ever worked on Shotgun Saturday Night, maybe an episode or two, not much, which didn't bother me because I had plenty on my plate.
Sure.
So no, it's, I was hoping to be successful. You want all your shows to be successful.
Yeah.
You want a happy Vince, not an angry Vince. So that's kind of where we were
there. All right. Well, I mentioned AAA and how they're being promoted and putting on shows and things like that. Do you know who is primarily working on that relationship? Is that a Bruce Pritchard thing, or is that someone else that's working with AAA?
I think Bruce had a whole hell of a lot to do with that. He liked it, and he knew those guys. It worked around them. So, I didn't see any reason why, if those guys are used correctly, and we used the best talents they had available for us, why it wouldn't work if they're not overexposed. And the goal was not to overexpose them.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned too, at this point, it's a talent play. You're just looking for new, fresh talent to bring into the company. And
that's all.
Yeah, they had some matches scheduled for the Alamo Dome, not for the main show, but there was going to be some matches there as well. But the Rumble itself is announced with 25 guys from the World Wrestling Federation, and the rumor is Terry Funk, the Funker, is going to be at the Rumble. How did that deal come together? Do you remember Terry being talked about or talked to and being a part of this Rumble at all, Jim?
Of course, Terry was willing to work. He wanted to be booked. He wanted the same as everybody else. Same goal, Paul. Payday.
That's right.
It's really not that complex. There's nothing really covert about it. It's just the fact that, we're looking to try new things, freshen up the brand, create some new opportunities for some different talents with different skill sets. And that's how this amalgamation of styles and talents all came together.
Well, and two, I think it's pretty cool to have him back in Texas. I mean, it's in San Antonio, for God's sake. So having a guy like Terry Funk come home, if you will, at the Royal Rumble has got to be pretty cool too. Yeah.
Anytime you get Terry Funk on a card, you're winning. How could it be anything else but that? So, and Terry was always welcome in our company. Everybody loved Terry, still do. So anytime there was an opportunity came up that fit Terry's skills, and he had abundance of them, we took a run at it because we all enjoyed working with Terry.
Well, JR, around this time, Hector Garza leaves EMLL for AAA and also for the chance to be in the WWF. He has a match against Jeff Hardy at the TV tapings in Tampa, and he impressed WWF officials. What was it, if you remember, about Garza that impressed you and some of the other WWF officials at this time?
Well, he had skills, Paul. He had a lot of talent. He had a real clean look. Was a talented young man, and he had a great outing with Jeff Hardy, which is not hard to have because he was really talented and still is. Always been a big fan of Jeff Hardy's. Look forward to the day that he's back on TV on a regular basis for somebody.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of where we were with that deal. Garza was an impressive young man that had a good body, talented, and he was new. He was new and had a real good look.
Always good to have fresh faces. Speaking of fresh faces, at a Superstars taping around this time, I think a lot of our listeners will find this to be interesting. It's a taping in Daytona Beach, and Aldo Montoya, who would be the future Just Incredible, defeated Mike Awesome. That's right, Mike Awesome. What was it about Mike Awesome back then? I mean, he's a big guy, which WWF often looks for. What didn't click? I mean, you would think he would be that mold for the WWF.
Well, he would have been, Paul, if he had minded his own business and not deviated off the road with extracurricular bullshit. Yeah, there's no reason he wouldn't have been good.
Yeah,
just a matter are you going to walk the straight and narrow? And he had some issues there doing that at that point in time, unfortunately for him. So again, you're looking for guys to get over. that might be able to get over. We might get lucky on somebody. So I think that's where we were with that. It's just trying to get somebody over new, and some of it worked and some of it didn't.
It's so unfortunate. That guy, I mean, he had some of the most brutal matches in ECW, but he was a big guy that had athletic skill, could do stuff off the top rope. Just an impressive performer, and it's sad that he's no longer with us. Speaking of Dustin, who you touched on earlier from Battle of the Belts, here he is. He's defeating the Executioner and Paul Bearer with, which is Terry Bam Bam Gordy. He hits Gordy with the urn after the match, and it's Terry Gordy's last appearance for the company. It just didn't work for him at this point, did it, Jim?
It was over. We did a favor for Michael Hayes to get Terry some work. A lot of us had worked around Terry for, many years prior. He was another guy that was lovable and people liked, but it just it was past his prime.
Yeah,
he had issues, and God bless him, that he couldn't control. Isn't it funny? All these common denominators are.
That's right.
How do you manage your life? And we all wanted to help Terry. There's no doubt about that. It just was, he was past the time of being productive on the road, at least in my take on it. And nobody wanted him to succeed more than me, because you talk about an athletic big man.
I know you loved him. Yeah.
Terry Gordy was just phenomenal. And I still think it was a good gamble.
Sure.
It just didn't get over.
While we're here talking about Terry Gordy, do you remember some of your last interaction with Terry? Maybe it was in behind the scenes here at WWF. Do you remember some of the last times that you had?
Just the fact that he was unable to control his urges, and it was sad. Again, you see a friend like him that's just struggling to get back straight and do the right things, and he couldn't seem to control those situations. So most of my conversations with him were when he was a little bit affected, or whatever you want to say. He just wasn't himself, and he was slurring speech. And, he was unsure of what he could do, what he couldn't do, all those type of things. It's the same story. It's the sad story about a lot of pro wrestling stories. The talents, they think their career's going to last forever. The paydays are never going to end, and all that stuff. And they do end. And we were just trying to help some guys and help ourselves as well, to be perfectly honest, and see if we could get one last squeeze of that fruit.
Yeah.
And Gordy was the kind of guy that if he got back to his normal work ethic and work abilities, would have been worth the gamble, but it wasn't. It just didn't click, and we decided pretty much unanimously that we needed to part ways.
Well, JR, we'll move on, and from the Observer, we have Undertaker pinning the Goon. Goon used the hockey stick first, but Taker got it back from him and used it on him before putting on the tombstone. Cornette started yelling about Undertaker, and then the lights went out. When they went on, Undertaker was behind Cornette and gave him a tombstone and put him in a body bag. As Cornette was being carried out in the body bag, the agents kept dropping him accidentally on purpose, and everyone was laughing about it.
Inside joke.
How funny was this, and how hot was Jim in the back? Do you remember this, JR?
Jim was not happy. He got ribbed, and they set him up pretty good, and everybody got to laugh at Cornette's expense, which did not suit Cornette very well, which I do understand. But Corny was hot. He was angry, and he felt like he had been misled, betrayed. He didn't want to be the butt of a joke. Can't say as I blame him. So anyway, it was just these are a lot of failed experiments.
I have a feeling if wrestlers could do that to Jim Cornette now, they'd be skipping him like a rock in that body bag down the aisle. My goodness, that's something else.
They need to get over it.
Yeah, exactly.
The ones that are bitching about Cornette don't have a third of his talent. Didn't have a third of his talent.
Woo! There you go.
But and they still don't. But some people can't stand the truth, and looking in the mirror that this crazy guy from the South is more talented than us. And there's nobody in a wrestling business, with the exception of Bobby Heenan, that was as good a manager as Jim Cornette or Paul Heyman.
Mm.
So
Mount Rushmore guys right there.
Yeah, talented dudes.
Yep. Well, Jim, also from The Observer, Vince Russo, I know we were just talking about talented people, as Vic Venom, basically doing a Mark Madden gimmick, predicted Hart to win the Rumble to get himself over. When this happens on Livewire, how pissed off was Vince McMahon? Do you remember this whole deal when this went down? He's predicting Hart to win the Rumble to get himself over. Was Vince pissed at this type of thing?
I don't remember the pissed. He might have. Don't remember it.
There's rumors that Vince changed the finish of the Rumble because of this. Do you remember hearing any validity to this at all?
I don't remember it, Paul. It could have happened.
Yeah.
Certainly could have happened. But I don't remember any specific details because
Okay.
it was just there was a myriad of issues that were being addressed and discussed and trying to be solved in an ongoing way. So it could have happened. Certainly could have happened. But I don't know. It just was not a very pleasant place to be at that point in time. So many changes, trying so many guys, that many of us had emotional investments made within their abilities. And it was just, I don't know, it just was sad that we had to travel that road. But at the end of the day, it was a decent, the Rumble was a good show, but it sure took, it was a lot of politics getting to the end. A lot of agendas a lot of masters were being served.
It sounds like it. So we're building on. It's December 30th as we continue to make that build to the Rumble. It's a Monday Night Raw taping, and it's a historic one, Jim. It's the first Raw that ever draws a $100,000 house. Is this something of a big moment for WWF at this point?
Yeah, I'd say so. It was another measuring stick of how much success you're having,
sure,
or not, with this box office receipts. So I think we all took pride in some of those milestones. You should take pride in them, and that was a good one. $100,000 house was a nice accomplishment, and everybody should feel good about their combined efforts to hit some of these goals.
That's a show that sometimes goes down in infamy because there's a classic promo exchange between Bret and Shawn Michaels, and you're in the ring for this one. This is the one that Bret has said before that he didn't feel comfortable with, the homophobia portion of this promo, and that was Shawn and Vince were pushing for it. Do you recall Vince and Shawn pushing Bret to certain points to really just continue to create that heat between the two of them? Was it Shawn and Vince that you felt like were kind of pushing that envelope?
Well,
really?
Certainly it was Vince.
Yeah.
And Shawn had Vince's endorsement. So Shawn had a free pass. And Vince kept Shawn happy as he could. So, that was basically Vince. Vince knew what he wanted there. And then, and whether it was good or bad, that's what he wanted. And Bret tried to make it work and tweak some of the creative so that he could at least tolerate it in his own mind. A lot of guys are just uncomfortable with the homosexual issues. And now in today's world, you say, well, how could that be such a big deal? It shouldn't have ever been such a big deal. Someone's sexual preference is what that is. It's their sexual preference. Today, you wouldn't say much about it. Good Lord, look at AEW. We've got a very diverse roster. And so that's where we are with that. It's just changing times, man. Times are changing.
The problem back then, too, it was always used in a derogatory manner. It was
Correct.
said as a derogatory thing. So,
yeah. Well, like I said, Gorgeous Shorts became one of the most famous wrestlers in the world on his gimmick based entirely on homophobia.
That's right. Well, up next, the Grimm Twins are let go from the WWF. And for those of you who don't remember the Grimm Twins, that's Ron and Don Harris. JR, why didn't it work for these guys around this time?
I think they were not real pro. They weren't real pro with Shawn Michaels. Didn't have, they weren't going to be intimidated or made to think that they were in a place where they couldn't get out of or what have you. I think there's a little heat there with Shawn and the Harris twins. I know they had a little confrontation in the garden, in the locker room, but they weren't going to be trifled with. They weren't going to be intimidated, and they didn't care if Shawn had Vince's ear or they didn't. That's just them. They could care less. So, and it worked out where they left.
Yeah. Well, from the Observer, well, there you go. I mean, listen, it sounded like if Shawn didn't like you, you weren't going to have that, you know, probably Vince wasn't going to be a big fan of you either at this point. So.
Yeah.
Well, from the Observer around this time, live wire format changed again this week. Jim Ross was on with Vic Venom. The newsworthiness was the last 15 minutes. They didn't screen the calls, so they said, and it was obvious they were telling the truth. Since most of the calls were about WCW, Ross was very negative toward WCW.
Very, very negative. I mean, he was negative.
He was
so negative. He was very negative. And when I say negative, I mean negative.
With a capital V, very negative toward WCW, saying he fell asleep during the Hogan-Piper match and said that Hall and Nash maybe should attend a WWE pay-per-view show because they haven't been near as good on pay-per-view since they left the WWF. When asked about signing Randy Savage, Ross said that the WWF was interested in recruiting younger athletes and that they weren't looking for wrestlers that are my age, referring to himself. So this is a little Red Ash JR on the show. What do you remember about this, Jim? I love it.
That's what Vince wanted. So Vince wanted that's the direction he wanted to go. He wanted controversy to create some cash and have me be the liaison, the voice of that voiceless group of folks.
You were good at it, buddy.
So, well, thank you. But it's just basically get a little tutelage from Vince. He'll tell you what he wants, give you some examples, and just go out and do it. So that's kind of what I did. I tried to do it that way. I didn't want to have the boss going nuts on me because I'm not negative enough or being heelish enough for the moment of that storyline. So, yeah, but it was a little bit. It was different for me. It was actually kind of fun because it's just a different role. Everybody wants to be a heel for whatever reason in wrestling. And so that's kind of where I was there. I just following orders from the old man and trying to pull off the role.
God, so many people love Red Ash JR, but there's just something there. It's a heel Jim Ross that, man, it's just waiting to come out. And you're so good at it, Jim. I love it. Well, around this time, Jerry Lawler buys out Jerry Jarrett for his half of the USWA. What do you remember about this? And did you remember talking to the King about this while this is all going on?
Well, Jerry just wanted to run his territory. He wanted to still be in charge and create the storylines, keep himself on top for USWA. It's his company, his baby. So, we talked about stuff like that all the time. I never understood, he didn't have a great infrastructure down there, did Jerry. So what do you mean he didn't have the people? He didn't have the background. He didn't have the staff. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
He didn't have the staff that what Vince had, the infrastructure. So, and I just thought Jerry was putting too much pressure on himself in this particular time. But in any event, that's what he wanted to do. And, the WWF is always, Vince has always been a big proponent of Lawler's. Seems to me like they work well together. So in any event, that's kind of where we were. We just trying. Everything was being thrown against the wall, Paul, to see what was going to stick.
Yeah,
talents, tag teams, whatever it may be. And some of those ideas are really good, and some of those ideas were really bad.
Since we're here, I have to ask, did you ever personally work at all with Jerry Jarrett, longtime promoter?
I worked around him when he came to work for Vince, and he was doing some administrative work. I know Jan and I had him over for dinner a time or two while he was working there. Home cooked meals always nice, and she was a fabulous cook. So, but I didn't work with him a lot.
Okay.
He was a lot like working with Cowboy. I mean, they had the same philosophies. So, no, and he knew a lot about wrestling. He was a good wrestling guy. So I'm not sure what else goes along with all this stuff with Jarrett, but I didn't have any issues with him. And he was a smart guy, but he was in one of those rabbit hole type things there with in his role. It was going to be tough for him.
All right. Well, Shotgun Saturday Night debuts, and it's unlike any other WWF production, JR, and that's on purpose, I'm sure. But what did you think of that product? Anything you can recall? It was a different kind of show. It was a late night Saturday night show. They had the Elmo deal with Sonny, and they did a little bit of crazy stuff on that show. What'd you think of that one?
I thought it was a reach at times.
Yeah,
we're trying to reinvent, trying to be not PG WWE, and just have a different presentation, a different feel. It's a huge transitional period in the life and times of WWF, soon to be WWE. Maybe it's already changed. Hell, I don't know. So no, I just thought we're trying too much new stuff, and nothing really had a chance to get over because everything seemed to be on a trial basis, and that's how I felt with that stuff. Too many new guys, and some of these situations were not well thought out. We had ideas for people, but then the follow up, more often than not, was not what it needed to be.
JR, you couldn't be more spot on at, just going through the notes and talking about this change, that change, ECW, USWA, so on and so forth. Now here we are. There's talk of putting Bradshaw and Wyndham together as the new Blackjacks. Does anything with the word new in front of it ever get over?
Not normally. And I did like the Bradshaw Wyndham potential.
Yeah, the pairing. Yeah.
Good heels. And they seem to fit each other's larger than life Texas-based personality. But I like the Bradshaw Wyndham pairing at that point in time. I thought that's all the shit we were trying. That may have had the best chance of a lot of really getting over in time.
Well, it's reported in the Observer that Tiger Jeet and Tiger Ali Singh are on their way in. More newness. How does this deal all come together, JR?
Giant pain in the ass. Seriously, I mean, really, wow. That's what it was.
Yeah.
A father trying to get his son booked, using the potential of the territory of in India and in those areas. That was the deal there. So it was a way to we create a star that audience could identify with. Then we took a major step in creating a brand, the WWF brand, with an identifying star in India. But it was ill-advised. The kid wasn't ready. He had a great look, great smile, good body. He was going off the fumes of his father, who was quite the character. But again, it was just, the idea had merit on paper, but it was just the wrong people cast in the wrong way.
Well, JR, we have finally made it. We have arrived. The buildup is over. We're now at the show, and it's a big one. 60,525 fans. It's the second largest paid attendance in the U.S. at this point. The Alamo Dome in San Antonio. What was it like walking into that venue for the show, JR?
Oh, it was fun because, I was a big fan of the Alamo Bowl, and Oklahoma just recently played in that facility. They beat Oregon. Whatever the hell the bowl was called. But
I can't keep up with them.
Maybe it's the Alamo Bowl. Hell, I don't know. It was cool. San Antonio is a great place to visit. The food's great, party atmosphere. Always the weather's decent. So it was a new area for us, new venue for us, and we had set the plate to have a big house built around Shawn Michaels, considering that was his hometown. Hey, folks, it's time to take your podcast game to the next level. And you certainly want to get your almighty push. My God, we have to have a push, right? We'll get that over to adfreeshows.com. Now, I'm telling you, if you're a fan of Grilling JR, adfreeshows.com has the entire episode library, and it's got no ads. 0 ads, zilch, none. Ad-free and on video starting at just $9. Did you hear what I said? $9. You spend more than that at Starbucks, for God's sakes. 2 mornings. But that's not all, folks. We got tons of bonus content, including my after-hours roundtable, where drinking was involved with Eric and Tony. You simply will not find a better value in all of wrestling. Hey, look, don't make me go red ass, because by God, you know I will. Hurry over to adfreeshows.com right now and sign up. And I thank you.
Well, it's the show's not well received from Observer readers. They gave it a 46.1%. As far as 46.1%, voted thumbs down. And Meltzer was critical of the show. He said, from a match quality standpoint, this wasn't a good show. The Rumble match was a one-man show with nobody else even making a dent. Michaels, bothered by the flu, had his worst pay-per-view match in several years, although in his hometown, with a crowd that had come largely to see only one match, it came off well as a spectacle, and to many hid the work rate. Sid may also have not been at 100% due to having an auto accident just 9 days earlier, although he had worked 3 house shows dates in the interim, as he did almost nothing. The crowd shots and general strong production were the highlights of a show that contained average to fair wrestling. JR, do you think that's a fair assessment of the show in your mind?
Yeah, it was a great show. It had its moments. It was an experimental show to see who could get over, who might get over. Experimental may not be the right descriptor. I'm not sure. But I didn't think it stunk, but it wasn't one of our greatest pay-per-view efforts.
I think the most newsworthy item is about what I'm about to say to you. This is straight from the Observer. Here we go. After several years, they finally got Jim Ross in the black cowboy hat as a full-time gimmick.
Yeah, that's true.
Jim, who convinced you to do it? Did you know it was going to be a full-time gimmick at that point?
No, well, I kind of got the feeling that Vince liked it a lot, and he knew that I didn't want to carry a Cowboy. Bill Watts said that one of the biggest issues he had about being Cowboy Bill Watts is taking that goddamn hat with me where I went. And he said, you don't want to get into the gimmick where you got to wear a hat, because you got to wear it to take it with you all the time at airports and the planes and wherever you may be. It's part of your attire. And so I kept those lessons from the early days of my career in mind, that, let's try to stay away from this hat gimmick if we can. So that was the original pushback on it. I wasn't against hats. It's just something you got to keep up with. When I took this fall on Saturday, 2 times during the day on Saturday, I couldn't find my hat, but I was still addled from this shot here on my face, and it was rough to deal with, to be honest with you. If I hadn't really wanted to be a part of and not let my team down, we have so many guys in AEW right now that are off because of injury or COVID or whatever, that's it's really daunting. The job Tony Khan did with Battle of the Belts and the short crew was no joke. It takes a business acumen to figure that out. And we just got to get some people healthy physically and from the virus. So it was that was a hat got a debut, and I've now gone through a lot of hats. I forgot to become a hat guy.
Yeah.
And I got a place in Oklahoma City called Shorty's Cowboy Hattery. People always said, "Where do you get your hats?" Well, I used to wear a Resistol. Austin got me a couple of Resistol hats, 100X, best hats that Resistol made. And so I I kind of got to be a fan of hats. So I got a hat maker in the stockyards in Oklahoma City. The lady's name is Shorty. Shorty does all of my hats and makes hats for big time cowboys and movies and rodeos, big time guys, of which I'm not one of. But they make my hats for me, and they're about $1,000 a piece. I remember Jan gave some of those hats away, and I almost shit myself. I said, "You realize how much these hats cost?" So, but it's all for good causes.
Oh, good.
But that's when the hat thing was born. What year was that?
1997, January. That's the first pay-per-view.
Wow.
Unbelievable. And
Yeah,
now,
it was good.
you can't go anywhere without it.
It's worked out well.
Yeah.
It's worked out well.
And Cowboy was right. It did become a full-time deal, and you got to take it with you wherever you go.
Yep.
So here we are. You got your hat on, and we're ready for a wrestling pay-per-view. And the first match on the card, it's Hunter Hearst Helmsley retaining the Intercontinental title, pinning Goldust in 16 minutes, 50 seconds. Helmsley was accompanied by Curtis Hughes, who was referred to as both Curtis Hughes and Mr. Hughes, and referred to as Helmsley's butler as opposed to his bodyguard. During the pregame show, when Doc Hendricks was running down the participants in the Rumble and mentioned Goldust, he was heavily booed, as he was during his ring introduction. So the turn hasn't quite gotten over like they thought. There was also a big babyface pop for Helmsley winning the match. After Goldust missed an elbow off the top, Mr. Hughes threw the belt to Helmsley. Hughes distracted the ref, and Helmsley kissed Marlena. Triple H getting a little lip action there on Marlena. Goldust beat Helmsley to the punch and clocked him with the belt, but as the ref was doing the count, Hughes pulled Helmsley out of the ring. Goldust then slammed Marlena's cigar in Hughes' face, but this allowed Helmsley to recover, and he hit the pedigree for the win. Helmsley has potential. This is hilarious to read right now because this is written in this time. He has potential, JR, but at this point, he's being pushed only on potential and politics and because he's got a good head of hair. His work is only slightly better than average, and his interviews and persona are below average. 2 stars. Meltzer really critical of Helmsley here. Was it just potential and politics why he was being pushed, Jim?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, it's better for this conversation to say, "Oh yeah, man, it blew up their locker room. I mean, my God, you've never seen any controversy like this. It was horrible." No, I'm sorry. Let's rewind that one. I knew he was going to be a star. If you couldn't figure that out, you're just being unobjective and being a typical paranoid wrestler. He was going to take some spots because he was willing to put in the work to see that got done. Some of his mannerisms and how he navigated the political waters were not universally accepted by a lot of guys that the Triple H's power base affected. But was he? I totally disagree with Meltzer on that one.
He would become the cerebral assassin, man. And whether you love him or hate him, he had some of the best matches out there. I mean, he became a star for sure. So there you go.
He was a great heel.
Yeah.
And he ended up being an excellent worker. If people that don't like Paul Levesque's work, it's because of politics.
Yeah.
You can't tell me he was a bad worker. That's bullshit. Come on. If you don't like him, just say you don't like him, and no matter how good he gets, I'm not going to like him. But that's how I looked at that scenario. But he always had great potential because he was always going to be prepared and educated. And I always thought he had great abilities. And some of his best matches were, as that heel that was continuing to advance and to grow. So. But I thought he had a lot of talent.
2 more follow-up questions on this one. Mr. Hughes, he returns here. How does Curtis make his way back into the company? Do you recall?
Well, he had a great look. I mean, my God, he was 6'4", and 300 pounds. Former football player at Kansas State. He was an athletic son of a gun. And when Curtis could master his sleep disorder, and people were worried about it because he'd fall asleep at a drop of a hat. So it's over on the themes of hats here today, seemingly. Curtis was, he got back because there was something there. You think, well, if we can just get some of this little things, picadillos eliminated or addressed. You can't find too many 300-pounders that athletic that, that's affordable and sitting on your front porch waiting on his break.
That's right. Lastly, question here, Goldust. Okay, you're thinking late 90s. This is 97. We talked about his character and how it was played off as a good heel at this point. Is he just not capable because of how well he did with it as a heel of really being a true babyface at this point, JR, in this time, in this era?
You're talking about Curtis?
No, I'm transitioning to Goldust. Is he just not capable at this point of being
it just takes some, it was going to take some time, just like society.
Yeah.
So it's going to take some time to accept others' beliefs without bringing your own version of politics involved in it. Whereas how ridiculous is this? If you don't believe like I do, then you're wrong.
Right.
No matter what. And something as touchy and as the theories on homosexuality, it's a lightning rod. Some people are going to like it and some people are not. It's a very complex topic to talk about. And that's what those are the waters that we were entering, to make the brand more universal, to make it more realistic, and move on.
Moving on is what we'll do here now. Up next, it's Ahmed Johnson, match 2, defeating Farook, Ron Simmons as we know him, in 8 minutes, 48 seconds, when the entire Nation of Domination interfered for the disqualification. Ahmed would clean house on most of them, including Wwe D, and throwing him over the top rope onto the other members, and afterwards chased down another member and gave him the Pearl River plunge through the French broadcast table. Again, you guys were spared here. Better than expected, Meltzer said. He gave it a 1.5 stars. This is a match that's built up for literally months, JR. Was this just a disappointment here?
Yeah. Ahmed he looked like a big Mercedes. And then when you got in and started the motor, it was a 4-cylinder. It just didn't have the power, the get up and go. Ahmed always seemingly had an issue. He was another one of those guys that thought the world was against him, and didn't want to take responsibility at times in his own actions. So that's where we were there. He was, again, he had that magnificent look. It's like I was talking to Jay Cargill, who is the TBS champion, women's champion. And I said, you got a lot of work to do. I talked to her about this yesterday. And I said, in basketball, a sport you did really well in, you got to learn certain things that go along with the game. For example, in basketball, you got to learn how to shoot free throws. In wrestling, there are certain things you got to learn to do that are crucial in the maturation of a pro wrestler. Taking a flat back bump, throwing crisp strikes, not being stupid, that type of thing. She's really smart, and she wants to be really, really good. She realizes that her look is her meal ticket right now, but it won't always be. Because once your look is exposed for several weeks or what have you, it becomes not as special. So you got to bring things with your game, and that's her charge right now. She's got to be able to do that, and it's not going to happen overnight. I don't even know if it'll happen in 2022. It's got to be constant work to get good at what you do, and that's where we are with her. And I'm really proud of her. When she walked up that stage with a little girl in her arms, that got me. That's real. It got me. And I really was proud for her at that moment, being a single mom, even though her ex was there, which is cool. Now she supported the mom and the little girl, even though they're not together any longer. That's that was a moment for me that kind of defined Jade, and started separating her a little bit more from the pack. Having a child made her more real, made her, just a comfortable fit to me. And which may mean she has to be a rugged baby face and not a bad heel. I don't know. The audience is always going to tell you what they want, what they want it to be.
Well, you talked about Ahmed with that 4-cylinder. I'm going to talk next about 2 guys that were 8 cylinders, if not more, and they were big boys. And finally seeing them come together in the ring here was fun for me as I went back and watched this. And this is Vader pinning The Undertaker. Before I jump into this match, Jim, 2 big men that just athletically gifted, but seeing them together in the ring without even watching this match, it's got to be cool to see 2 big guys like this head-to-head with one another.
You always wonder how unselfish both guys are going to be. And Taker didn't have to do anything he didn't want to do. But he was willing to be unselfish and try to have a good match with Vader. And because Taker knew ultimately, no matter where the blow-off was going to be, that he was going to go over. Simple.
Well, he was certainly unselfish with him here, JR, as Vader would pin Undertaker in 13 minutes and 19 seconds. After the big ring entrance pop for the Taker, the crowd died for most of this match, according to Meltzer. Not a good match at all, which is shocking. You would hope for more between these 2. But Paul Bearer comes to ringside during the match and will apparently become Vader's new manager, as Jim Cornette wasn't there, with the idea he's selling the injury from the angle on Superstars. Actually, since Cornette won't be going on the road and Bear is on the road full-time and has the natural feud with Undertaker, and Vader is being programmed with Undertaker, it makes sense in that regard. At one point, Undertaker did a springboard off the ring steps, but Bear shoved Vader out of the way, and Undertaker crashed into the guardrail. The finish saw Bear come off the apron and clock Undertaker with the urn. Vader threw Undertaker into the ring and hit the Vader bomb for the pin. Undertaker chokeslammed the ref after the match. I believe that was Jack Doan who took the chokeslam. This is a 1.25 stars. This is a big win for Vader, who really needs this after the Shawn Michaels program. With Taker losing here, JR, and Paul Bearer going with Vader, this is a renewal, if you will, for Leon here, right?
Yeah, give him another lease on life. Give him the proverbial hot tag. Kind of made him right with the world. Beating the Undertaker cures a lot of ills, quite frankly. So, but Taker did the right thing. So many times in our shows here, we've pointed out Undertaker doing the right thing.
Right. And
we all know that eventually, people say, well, I got to find controversy here. Hold on to see if he thinks something. There's got to be controversy here. God damn it. We love controversy and dirt. We love the dirt. So I need to manufacture more dirt. So that's where we were there. Taker doing the job, which is a rotten term, but Taker knew that eventually there's big money with he and Leon. Set the table. And if you're going to beat him in a blow off, you want to beat somebody. And that's kind of where we wanted to get Leon kind of put back together with a quality win and then move on. And I also think it might have been a little something that Taker could demonstrate to Shawn, that if you're really a good worker, it don't kill you to do the honors. And that whole deal about who did the job. Oh, the job. Who did the job, JR? I don't know. And furthermore, I don't give a shit. The fans largely don't care. Have a good match. Bust your ass. Give me good effort. Tell me a great story. And that's kind of where that was the run up to that deal. Let's get Leon back on level ground so that at some point in time he can work with Leon Vader, and they can draw up some big money.
Well, Jim, next up on the card, it's match 4, and it's Hector Garza and Pero Aguayo and Kinect beat Jerry Estrada and Heavy Metal along with Fuerza Guerrera in 10 minutes, 56 seconds. The AAA match, this match had no heat at all, according to Meltzer. The crowd didn't even know Aguayo, and once that was the case, the match had zero chance. The announcers gave this match tons more respect than WCW would have, but they also didn't have a Mike Tenay who had a clue of more than a few facts about the guys.
Yeah,
But
I didn't.
Yeah.
I admit it. I didn't have. I was not a fan. I didn't follow. Tenay followed a lot of different wrestling very stringently, and he was very good at it. He knew a lot of information there. And that was not my bailiwick. And it seems like I've done okay, not having to be a Hispanic or Mexican aficionado to extend my own career. But yeah, that match. I saw these names. I remembered. It was a hodgepodge. It filled some time, and in this case, it filled about 10, 11 minutes, and
11 minutes.
We call it a day. So anyway, I didn't know all the. I should have studied more, but it was a prelim match in the middle of the card, and only the Meltzers and the Tenays of the world probably gave a shit.
Well, Meltzer's going to bring you into this in a minute. He's going to talk about it. Here we go. He says, but this couldn't hold a candle to the Mexican matches in WCW. Vince McMahon was particularly bad, although he didn't treat it with disdain like WCW announcers like Dusty Rhodes and Bobby Heenan have, but came off bad, mixing up Estrada and metal on several occasions, even after he'd been corrected. Jim Ross tried and knew a few facts, but not enough to carry the match, but was smart enough to even mention on the air after the lack of crowd reaction that in the future, they'll be giving fans more information on these wrestlers to better acquaint them with them. So there you go. At least you said it on there. When talking about Connect, Ross mentioned that he had a win against Lou Thez. That would have been August of 78 to win the UWA World Heavyweight title for the first time, which to the few who knew who Thez was in those days would have made it appear that Connect must be about 65 years old. He's actually 44. He was 26 years old, and Thez was 62 when that match took place. Connect is probably also the only wrestler, and I'm hoping I'm even pronouncing that correctly here, JR, so that shows you my lack of Mexican wrestling knowledge. But he's probably also the only wrestler who ever pinned Andre the Giant in the deciding fall out of a 2 out of 3 falls match, and was a huge star in his prime in Mexico, but that was years ago. The hottest move was Garza doing his corkscrew plancha, which got a big response. It was interesting to see Metal, who was Garza's usual tag partner in AAA, on the heel side, and the two shook hands to acknowledge that, but the announcers didn't know the story there, so much of what was done had no meaning since the audience live clearly didn't know who anyone was, since AAA doesn't mean anything in San Antonio, and it meant even less to those on pay-per-view without it being told to them. Yep. Finish saw Aguayo use the double foot stomp off the top rope on Metal, although he actually missed the move and recognized it and did a piss-poor elbow drop on him for the pin. 1 star. My goodness, JR, you talked about it already a little bit, but how hard is it to try to get something like this over for 6 guys that are completely cold to the company?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, and you're in a very precarious spot, quite frankly. You know that the majority of the people that are listening to you don't give a shit about that match. So, and I believe that was factual then, and it's factual now. So it was tough. It was tough. That was the toughest match to call in the whole damn card.
Well, we're on to the big Rumble event. Steve Austin would win the Royal Rumble in 50 minutes and 29 seconds. This wasn't one of the better Rumbles, according to Meltzer, nor one of the worst. Basically, the Steve Austin show, as he lasted over 45 minutes and eliminated 11 people, which has to be some kind of a record. He did the Ric Flair and the Diesel gimmick in the same match. Mil Mascaras at age 58 looked surprisingly good, only because Meltzer had seen how bad he looks in Mexico, although he didn't want to sell for anyone and screwed up the Sultan's belly-to-belly. Mascaras eliminated Cybernetico at 21:38 and followed throwing Pieroth Jr. out at 21:44. Mascaras then climbed to the top rope and did a plancha on both, thereby eliminating himself at 21:55.
I'm sure that took an act of Congress to get that finish worked out.
Right. They explained that Mascaras didn't know the rules of a Royal Rumble. Oh, okay. There we go. Bret Hart came out to a huge pop, not selling the ankle injury they made such a big deal about last weekend. I can only assume when the decision was made for Hart not to win that they didn't want him to look weak, so they dropped the previously planned angle. Hart got the sharpshooter on Austin when Jerry Lawler, who had been doing the play-by-play, jumped up as the surprise entrant, and he lasted 8 whole seconds, basically long enough to climb in, get punched by Hart, and take a bump at 31 minutes and 6 seconds and falling out of the ring. Mankind suplexed Funk over at 49-17. There's our Terry Funk spot. And
Yep.
Undertaker dumped Mankind over at 49-33, leaving Mankind and Funk to brawl on the floor. At 50 minutes and 6 seconds, Hart threw Austin over the top, but neither referee saw it. What are you doing, Mike Chioda? You're not paying attention. And Austin got back in, which basically at that point ensured what the finish was going to be. Austin dumped Vader, Undertaker, and Diesel together at 50 minutes, 20 seconds, and followed by dumping Hart at 50 minutes, 29 seconds to win the match. 3 stars. This is legit the Steve Austin show. Leaving the show, you know the Austin train has left the station, JR.
Of course. Yeah. That was no brainer. It was going to be that way. It was going to be that way. He was getting over. And the last thing you do if you have a brain in your body is to derail that or slow it down. And a lot of the guys that Austin was beating in that Rumble were also guys that were looking to have runs with Steve, you know, going forward. They all wanted a piece of that hot redneck babyface because there's money there. So, yeah, it worked out well. That was good teamwork with all those guys. I really appreciated Vader and Undertaker, Diesel, of course, Bret. All those top guys are giving Austin that big rub, man, and he took advantage of it and ran with the ball.
Listen, go back and watch at least the Rumble match, not the whole card, but it's a who's who list of stars in this match. You had a young Rocky Maivia in this match coming down with the blue frills that he first debuted with. You got Mick Foley, Undertaker, so many guys in this match that a lot of us that are watching it, this is our teenage years and in our 20s, maybe some as kids, but man, it's a fun one to watch. We move on to match 6. It's Shawn Michaels capturing the WWF title for a second time, pinning Psycho Sid in 13 minutes, 49 seconds. The gimmick of Michaels and Jose Lothario coming out in their hometowns worked to perfection, as he was the total face and Sid was the total heel. Shawn did a few nice bumps to carry things, but really, the match was carried by the crowd heat as Sid looked really bad, and the match was mainly long rest holds, and they were able to get away with it because of the crowd heat. Sid backdropped Michaels over the top to the floor and gave him a power bomb on the mats on the floor. Sid went after Jose Lothario to his son Pete. Lothario jumped the rail, but Sid got him around the throat as well. Then Pat Patterson comes out. Sid kicks at him. Patterson doesn't sell it. Michaels then jumped on Sid. They get back in the ring, but there was a ref bump, so no count. When Sid chokeslammed Michaels, a second ref comes out, but Michaels kicked out of the pin.
You can tell that Patterson outlined this match.
Oh, yeah.
He's he used
Brilliant.
all the toys.
Yeah, he did.
All the toys, all the elements that were at his disposal. Pat would figure a way to hopefully and logically get them involved in the process.
Sid knocks out the second ref, JR. He went back after Jose Lothario, but Michaels got a TV camera and hit Sid twice with it. Sid kicked out of the pin for a great near-fall tease. However, after a super kick, Michaels got the pin. Post-match celebration for Shawn Michaels. It's his second title win. He beat the pants off the celebration for his first win and most world title change wins, which says a lot about the venue here and the quality of the respective matches. Meltzer only gave it 2 stars, although it sounds like a thrilling, exciting ending. Shawn winning here was really the crowning moment in his career. Was Sid better for this spot than Vader, in your opinion, Jim?
Well, depending on who's over the most at that point in time, I don't think Leon was quite over yet. And Sid had been around a little bit longer, and then the story went back a little farther. I don't know. This maybe 6-1 does the others. The old saying goes. But I had no issues with Sid. You know, Sid's had some health issues. You know, if we got everybody healthy, whether you're doing a job or you're not, for God's sakes, it would have been a lot better. There's always something. Always something. Everybody's got to have their out. Brother, you know, he's going to, and here's the good one. He beat him in the middle. What does that fucking mean to you? He beat him in the middle. What does that mean? All it means is the guy, he beat him without controversy or without much controversy. And they had a decent match before he beat him in the middle. Could have killed his career. Beating him in the middle. How dare you consider such an option?
Well, Jim, this show is finally looked back upon because of two things, really, if you talk to wrestling fans. It's Austin winning the Royal Rumble and then Shawn Michaels winning the world title. But this isn't necessarily the show of shows, is it, in your opinion?
No. It had some bright spots, like most pay-per-views do. But it certainly was not the pay-per-view that you would envision happening. But there were moments, again, as I said, Austin's performance and the sequencing of things that Austin did for 40 plus minutes is pretty amazing. And of course, Shawn gets the hero's welcome. He returns home, the underdog challenger. And all of a sudden he beats Frankenstein in his hometown. So, yeah, it was, no, it wasn't a great show, but some of the moments in it that helped create greater things going down the road, were certainly there in place. Did we further Austin and make Austin even more special? Yes. Did Shawn Michaels get his hero's welcome and, a feel-good moment for him and his family? Yes. Past that, there's things you could take and things you could leave.
Well, JR, we had 7 questions come in regarding the show from our AFS members. We're going to jump into those right now, and we're going to start with AFS Slapnut tier level Jordan Eubanks, and he asks, JR, how confident were you that the WWE could do these stadium shows so often?
Well, I wasn't overconfident, but I knew that if we had the right attraction, that the audience would support it if it was the right attraction. And the card was built well. No reason that we couldn't sell enough tickets to make it at least look good in the building. So I needed to see it before I was going to commit my soul to it, I can promise you. But I'm glad it worked out. And then all of a sudden it became the norm. And now it is the norm.
All right. Next up, we have AFS Slapnut tier Brandon LeMay, and he says, was Shawn happy to be ending the storyline with Jose Lothario? Do you remember this at all, JR?
Well, I think Shawn was happy he could help facilitate a break for Jose, who had been a big part of Shawn and Shawn's early career. One of the nicest things Shawn has done. And in that era, he wasn't known for doing a lot of nice things. But I know he loves Jose and he wanted to help Jose. And so for all those things, I'm happy to be a part of. But I think Shawn, like many, wanted to see things upgraded and become more contemporary and more updated, whatever.
Sure.
And so he was all in favor of that, changing the styles a little bit and things of that nature. So, but you know, I don't know. It's just, it's hard to say, but I think Shawn wanted to take care of Jose, but Jose's age and time had kind of come. And traveling was hard. And Jose had never traveled that much in years. So all of a sudden, that's where we were.
All right, up next is AFS slapnut Genaro Gonzalez, and he asks, was there anybody in the office or creative that wanted to keep the belt on Sid at this point?
Not that I recall. There could have been people who just didn't want to, like dealing with Shawn. But I don't think it was a big point of conversation.
AFS Slapnut Sean says, what did you feel was your role on commentary in this booth that had McMahon doing lead play-by-play and Lawler doing color? Also, how hard was it for you to be on a team with Vince in which he was still the lead play-by-play announcer when you had to know you were so much better? There you go.
Well, it didn't matter if I thought I was better or I wasn't. I have a role as the third man in the booth. So I can make up a story, though, for you, for controversy and
we're looking for
dirt. Dirt. I can do all that. And some of it I'll just make up because that works as good as not, you know.
Good for a social media plug, you know.
Yeah, what the fuck. So, but Vince is the boss. I don't understand this thing where people they talk about the WWE or AEW or wherever, like, you know, this is unheard of, or I wouldn't have done that, or I would have. Yes, you would have. Yes, you would have. Don't bullshit somebody. Paul, you would have done it.
Right.
No, I got too much pride and integrity. Well, you're in the wrong fucking business. Okay? You do what the boss tells you. You run the plays that you're instructed to run. So I'm sitting out there with my new hat on, just having a blast.
There you go. That's right. At the end of the day, they sign a paycheck, and if they're not telling you to do something that's not breaking the law, that's what you do. You do what you're supposed to, and you get paid for it. AFS Enhancement Talent Brad Bell says, at this point in 1997, did Vince still think that he could pay Bret under the long-term contract he had just signed? I've always been curious about this contract because from what I've read and heard, Bret says it was a 20-year deal. So I would assume the length of the contract was more attractive to Bret than the amount that, and it wasn't as large as the deal he got at WCW. So let's start there. He has some lengthy questions here. So did Vince still think he could pay Bret under the long-term contract he had just signed, that 20-year deal?
I think he thought he could. Yeah, I think he thought he could, but it's going to see how revenues were being generated. Because there's never a doubt that Vince wanted to keep Bret in the company. He's too valuable. Guys like Bret Hart come along once in a lifetime. And so Vince was always, Paul, a huge Bret Hart fan. Huge. And why?
Yeah.
And why not?
Right. What do you think was it, his follow-up question? I'm curious to this one. Do you know if there was a turning moment or what happened exactly? Or was it just Vince saying, hey, just thinking about it over a long period of time? Why did Vince finally feel like, hey, I'm not going to be able to pay out on this 20-year contract?
Looking at the bottom line, just doing the accounting. It's not there. It's going to restrict some growth in some other areas based on the cash flow process of taking care of Bret and that debt service. So it just Vince he overbooked himself. And unfortunately, the monies that he hoped was going to be being regenerated and created didn't work out. Didn't work out well at all.
Brad goes on to say, I've always wondered this because of the reported terms, because then you had Tyson, who would appear shortly after Montreal, and then Shawn was paid while he was out with injury so that he didn't sign with WCW. So just some curiosity there. But I'm assuming Vince had to say, hey, do I really want to put all these eggs, all these dollars in one basket, or can I use this money to spread across, to do other things like a Tyson, like if I need to do this with Shawn and other things. So you wonder if that's the thought process at that point.
I don't know. I just think he ran out of money and he bit off more than he could chew. Simple that. That's a simple fact on how that worked.
All right. AFS Enhancement Talent David Scott asks, this was the last live appearance of Glenn Jacobs as Diesel. Only a few months later, the build to the Kane character started. Do you know where in the timeline the decision was made to transition him into his new role as Kane? And what was it that let you all know that he was the right person for the role?
Well, Glenn Jacobs is one of the finest people we ever hired in WWE, and still is, ranks there in my view. That's why he's so successful as a mayor in Knox County, Tennessee. He's a good man. He has credibility. He has integrity. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
So you don't get too many athletic 6'9", 300-pound guys that got college degrees and are sane without going the extra mile. We knew that the gimmick Diesel was not going to work. He didn't have to have a committee or some sort of media group to do studies. It just wasn't going to work. That whole thing was ill-fated. Billionaire Ted and the fake Razor, the fake Diesel, and the heel JR. It just didn't work. It didn't fit anybody's persona. And it was written week to week. So when you find things that are booked week to week, including in today's world, they normally don't have a great chance of surviving in short term.
Right.
So if you like it so fucking much, what are you going to do next week? What are you going to do at WrestleMania? What are you going to do at the Royal Rumble? Wait. Hold on. Too many questions. And that's kind of how I saw that piece of business. But Glenn Jacobs was always going to have a home. We just had to find the right spot for him creatively. You're not going to not use Glenn Jacobs. And then finally we came across this idea to do Undertaker's brother. Their size was comparable. It was a cool deal. So, but Glenn and guys like Glenn should always have a place in anybody's locker room.
And the rest was history, JR. Had become a Hall of Famer. So There you go.
Yeah. Good man.
Final question from AFS Slapnut Casey Wood. He asks, what was Austin's planned trajectory after winning the Rumble going into WrestleMania 13 before Shawn misplaced his smile, forcing Vince to change creative plans for the proverbial road to WrestleMania?
Oh, God, I don't know. Slapnut Casey Wood. Fuck. Jesus Christ. Austin's planned trajectory. That's 1997 we're talking about, right?
Yes, sir.
I ain't got a clue.
Yeah.
Planned trajectory. His trajectory was to be the top guy in the company and end up being the WWF champion. Headline WrestleMania and leave one of those WrestleManias as the guy. He accomplished everything he wanted to accomplish, but he wanted to work on top in singles, and so that's where he was headed. That's where he landed, and that's where he became so successful. He knew what he wanted,
right?
So it just the plan. I don't know that Steve had a planned trajectory. I don't know if he could spell trajectory.
Well, JR
Slapnut Casey Wood thinks it's important to find out his trajectory. Casey, I'm glad you sent us a question, and I'm glad you're watching and you listen to her.
Listen, Casey, we appreciate you listening, and we ask that every question you ask from now on to Grilling JR includes the words planned trajectory going forward.
So I can ignore them.
That would be great.
You got a break today because I'm on meds.
I love it. Well, Jim, speaking of planned trajectories, next week we'll be discussing here on Grilling JR, you and Conrad most likely, Royal Rumble 2002. Why? Well, it's Royal Rumble season, damn it. And the NWO's coming in. The brand extension is coming. Mr. Perfect is returning. Triple H makes his return from his quad injury at Madison Square Garden to one of the biggest pops ever. My God.
One of the biggest ones ever. But remember, we're not sure he's going to get over or work. We just talked about that. Wait a minute. You can't just blow it off, because Dave Meltzer said there were issues there. Come on, Dave. You're smarter than that. And he is. He's a brilliant guy. But goddamn, the guy was a no-miss prospect because he willed his way into becoming a star, and he worked hard on his game, and he hit the end of the road. I don't know. I haven't heard much about him. I've always been concerned about Triple H's health in recent months because of the alleged, or not alleged, but the heart issues
Yes.
and I don't know, they've kept that really under wraps. And you got to wonder what Triple H's relationship with upper management, i.e. Vince, if it has anything to do with the dismantling of NXT and rebuilding it in Vince's vision. I don't know the answer to that.
I tell you what, based on the pop that he got at Madison Square Garden, though, I think that probably changed the trajectory of where they saw his career going from that point on. I tell you that right now.
I agree.
And you guys are going to have fun on that show. That sounds like a lot of good shit to cover. Royal Rumble 2000.
Conrad loves the dirt. He's like a small child. Conrad in the dirt is like sending him into a donut house with a coupon.
Oh,
He loves it. He loves it. God bless him. So,
yeah.
And we all love Conrad.
We do. We love you, Conrad. Oh, yes, we do. We love you. I'm starting to sing Bye Bye Birdie songs. All right, well, listen, before we get out of here, JR, first I got to say, adfreeshows.com. That's where you get to answer these questions. You can find out about the planned trajectories of wrestlers right here from JR, and that's how we're doing it this year in 2022. So sign up. JR doesn't know this yet. I'm about to hit him up when I hit stop recording for a bonus episode that he and I need to record this month.
Yeah, you boys don't worry about the mules. You just keep loading the wagon, don't you?
We do,
JR,
man.
we're sorry you had that issue, that little cancer issue, and we're sorry you busted your face up, but could we do an extra, well, I mean, on the trajectory of where the Grilling JR is headed, we think that we need something along those lines, at least until your eye heals up.
They can't get enough of you, JR. What can I say? That's all we hear in our survey feedback. We want more Jim Ross. We can't get enough of them.
That's just amazing.
So we're going to try to give the fans what they want. You and I are going to try to figure out some time to schedule a bonus show this month. But that's where it's at, man. You get access to Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone. Oh, isn't that fun? It's kind of scary, actually. Kurt Angle. You get to see Jeff Jarrett. You get all kinds of Eric Bischoff.
Conrad loves Jeff Jarrett.
Oh, that's the golden child, right?
That's his boy. Yeah, that's his boy. And that's good. I think that sometimes they deserve each other.
I love it. I love
really
the end
do.
of our shows.
I love that. I think they're doing the right thing. So you got to take care of your boy, Connie. My
boy.
Jeff had beautiful hair. My God.
The golden
It was
locks.
golden.
Yeah.
The golden child.
Oh man, good stuff.
Hey, but they're all doing good on this our network, and
All doing great.
yeah, and that's all that matters. Our team wins,
That's right.
and we have fun busting balls going through the process.
We do. We bust balls. We're going to do some big things this year. Sign up now so you can be a part of it. There's rumblings about another Top Guy weekend this year. Who knows? Conrad has really has a vision, and that's what I like, to see a leader who has a vision, and the vision includes a lot of fun for the members of this group, a lot of good content. So make sure you check it out. I'm sure the group will be growing. He has some plans for that as well. But JR, before we get out of here this week, I got to let you talk about JR's BBQ.com. I know you had to have a tremendous Christmas season, didn't you?
It was good. I'm very grateful, quite frankly, very, very grateful. It exceeded our expectations. And we're never closed. We're always open. Stephen Link runs my site, does a great job of captaining the ship, and he always works. You know, we've sent out hundreds and hundreds of orders, and I'm very grateful and thankful that we've had the business that we've had. So just don't forget about us. JRSBBQ.com. It costs nothing to look, and you got to eat. Man's got to eat. Paul, God damn it.
Trust me, I know, buddy.
So there you go. And everything is moving along well there. And we hope to have some interesting news on that front coming up soon as well.
Good. I'm excited, and I'm glad to hear that you had a great holiday season. But don't stop, because those mustard bottles and ketchup bottles will run out quick. Get the seasonings, the mustard. My son just came up to me the other day. Dad, we got to get more of that honey mustard sauce. I'm like, well, don't worry. I know the website. I know where to get it, son. We'll make sure you get some. So
take care of your boy.
There you go.
We'll deliver the goods, Paul.
That's right. Come on, Daddy. Take care of me, Daddy.
That's it.
But listen, this has been a great time. We hope you enjoy it. I enjoy spending time with you, JR. Royal Rumble 1997. Check it out. We had a lot of fun talking about it here today. We'll be back again next week on Grilling JR. I'm Paul Bromwell. I've been talking to the legend, the voice of wrestling, Jim Ross. Jim, thank you this week. Appreciate your time. We'll see you again next week here on Grilling JR.
Have a good week, everybody. God bless all of you. Thanks.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.